I thought I'd try a different side of my room today. This is my office. Anyways, I want to go a little bit deeper in Medigap theory to talk about some things that most agents that I've ran into at least, aren't quite fully aware of or even how to access. There's something in Medigap called a trend increase, and most of us aren't even aware of that. And the ones who are probably are looking at that to give a projection for what Medigap's going to do in the future. No one's really, however, talking about some of the long term variables that I want to dive into today. The real long term variable for Medigap, I would argue, is not trend, it's your block's composition. Let me explain. This is Ansall with probably a 6 minute Medicare minute. So let's really get to the bottom of what's at the anatomy of a Medigap increase. So when an agent analyzes a Medicare supplement carrier, they're probably looking at, like on CSG or something, when the last rate increase was, what their trend assumption is, whether their attained age or issue age, what the profit margin of the carrier is, how long they've been in business, what their block size is, et cetera, et cetera. You guys get the idea. But these are really surface level questions. The deeper question to ask here is who is left in this carrier's block of business? Medigap pricing doesn't just react to medical inflation, though that is a large driver behind it. Medigap rate increases are reacting to who stays and who leaves in the block. So if you have a block that's a bunch of healthier policyholders, and if they lapse at a higher rate than the sicker ones do, then the morbidity of the remaining block will increase faster than simple aging can predict. That's called block compression. And once that block compression starts, it ends up feeding on itself. Healthier leaves, sick stay. Premiums go up. Healthier leaves, sick stay. So if the rates continue climbing, those who can pass underwriting will leave at a higher rate. The morbidity of that block worsens then, which in turn makes the rates go up again. And the trend doesn't even have to change. It's because the people on that block or that plan, their health status is changing. And that's the difference that actuaries might not have priced correctly for. Now, we can also connect this to MA or Medicare Advantage. So if you look at MA penetration, when it increases in a market, who typically leaves the Medicare supplement? It's usually those who are more sensitive to price increases, those with lower utilization that don't see a need for the Medigap, or people who are willing to have a volatile network trade-off, right? And the ones who stay in the Medigap are the ones with higher utilization or those who are risk-averse individuals. And even wealth-tiered retirees if they want the kind of insulation that Medigap brings. So that shift alone can change a block's actuarial trajectory, and it's at no fault of the owner of the carrier. The carrier may have a trend between 6 to 8%, but the morbidity drift from that block composition can add pressure to that trend, and then it explodes with an increase. And I don't think people are really looking at that when they are pulling CSG's projected or previous increases over the time, right? And then let's talk about a margin myth. I was at a conference this past week and I heard an agent who said Medigap carriers are making 4 to 6% profit on the policies that they're selling. That statement, I mean, it sounds like a precise, almost exact metric, but that's not reality. First, Medigap is regulated under minimum loss ratio requirements. Non-group plans 65%, group plans 75%, right? So most Medigap policies, at least on the individual level, have to hit at least 65% loss ratios over a set period of time without the State Department of Insurance requiring them to give refunds. And then if a group plan is projecting 75% loss ratios, it doesn't mean that they're gaining 25% profit. What it means is that remaining 25% that they're not spending on claims has to cover commissions, admin expenses, distribution costs, claims processing, overhead, capital cost, and then profit on top of all that. So Medigap or Medicare Supplement is not a high margin product the way most people just naturally assume that it is. Now, it's a stable margin product as long as that block is being managed correctly. But the key behind all this is that the margin on a Medigap plan isn't something that completely breaks the block. It's that block composition that can. So you can run a 5% margin on a stable, well-mixed Medicare supplement block of business literally forever. But you cannot survive the adverse selection that compression brings, even if you have modest 4, 5, 6% margins. So where we can take this and get even more strategic with it as an agent. If you're evaluating a MedSup carrier, instead of asking questions like, hey, when was their last increase? Ask more pointed questions like, how long have they been in the state, or how long have they had a national block? Is their block open? Is their block closed? What is the persistency after increases on this block? Do they file annually, or are they suppressing filings and then catching up later? Are they exposed to aggressive GI rules in that state? Do they pay full comp on guaranteed issue business? Do they have a block of business that's closed and open in the state? Does their block mortality, is it accelerated? Because that really changes the composition of a block of business based on the morbidity behind it. So morbidity changes the rates of a Medigap carrier, and then rates going up changes the mobility of that carrier because the healthy people leave and sick people stay. It's called adverse selection. So it's a feedback loop that continues the higher you raise your premiums and the faster you raise them. But let's even push this further. If you've got a Medigap carrier that enters a state real aggressively with underpriced rates so that they can gain market share, they will inevitably attract healthy new business. If they then have to correct their pricing 2 to 3 years later, like we're seeing right now, that type of shock lapse can remove those same healthy lives that came for the low premium, and now they've created an internal anti-selection problem. That's how blocks destabilize. Not because someone had a trend that was 6% and now they've moved it up on their next filing to 8%, but it's because of how the behavior on that current block of business has changed for the carrier. Now, let's talk long-term rate sustainability and really what you should keep your eye set on. So as we see Medicare Advantage penetration is increasing nationally, we're not going to see Medicare Supplement disappear. We're going to see Medicare Supplement start to concentrate. It's becoming a volatility insulation product for those who can understand. But if the premium growth outpaces Social Security's COLA or cost of living adjustment, if that happens for multiple consecutive years, the affordability of a MedSup is going to become the limiting factor on who can take it and who just can't afford it. And as that affordability caps, that will block Medigap growth. That's the balancing act that actuaries have to deal with. As a takeaway, I would suggest as an agent, stop obsessing over what last year's rate increase was or what a trend assumption is. Stop repeating that profit margins are 4 to 6%. That's a talking point. That's not necessarily accurate. You need to start watching the in-force policy count year over year and then track the lapse rates after major increases. Lifetime loss ratio projections, the GI rule exposure, especially if you're paying full comp, and then how much of that business is distributed or concentrated amongst the block of business that you're selling. Medigap sustainability is behavioral and it's structural. It's not just an actuarial price, because you can't determine if legislation comes in like they did in Texas and they passed the House bill that now requires you to offer a Plan G at double the premium that is at 65. You can't price for that if you opened your block a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago and had no idea these things were coming.